common observation in a Hindu household is the images and pictures of gods and deities scattered everywhere or found in multiple locations is probably the better word. You can find images of gods and deities on calendars. You can find them on portraits on the wall. You can find them on box covers. You can find them on book covers. You name it. It's present everywhere in that sense. In fact, many have this habit of giving the images of gods and deities as a gift to anybody that comes to their house. And many have this habit of keeping a miniature image in their car or vehicle to give them a sense of protection during their drive. Where did this belief come from? And that is exactly what we are going to explore in this video. Now, the theistic tradition, the Hindu theistic tradition, really believed in the divine name, in the name resonating and connecting to all the senses, which is why when you name a child after a deity or a god, whenever you're calling out the child's name, you are making sure your organ of speech is connected to that. When you are listening to somebody with the name of a god or a deity, then the organs of hearing are engaged in that. Same way, when you're keeping a picture or an image of a god or a deity, then the visual senses are connected in that regard. And also, by having the pictures and the image readily accessible, you have a ready access for prayers instead of going to the puja room all the time. A great example that is followed in many Hindu households is when you're about to step out of the house, you would quickly pray to a calendar or an image or a portrait of a god or a deity and then step out of the house. Almost like a ready access of prayer is what it is. So think about it in another way, that you have multiple puja rooms or temples scattered all around your house. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but essentially that's kind of one way of looking at it in that regard. Now, the other aspect as to why you have this images and gods in multiple places is the sense of protection. It's almost like a cloak of protection of cloak, that by having the images of gods and deities all around the house and in your car and in your wallet and in your purse, you are always accompanied, connected, and there is somebody taking care of you. So that sense of protection is the other aspect of it. Now, the flip side of this belief system is fear. What happens when that image breaks? What happens when that portrait gets stolen? What happens when that book cover gets stolen? What happened when you have to dispose of that calendar of last year, which had the images of gods and deities? There is a fear. Where do you dispose it of? And unfortunately, in many cases, the temples become a dumping ground because many individuals feel they should not dispose this, or it's not right to dispose it in their own home. So they go ahead and just dump it in a temple, as an example. And that's a very unfortunate aspect of this, because it is fear driving that, the fear of disposing of that paper or fear of disposing of that image. Now, what does the spiritual path say? The spiritual path is all about discipline. It's less about a distributed, heterogeneous focus. It's all about narrowing it down. It's all about contemplation, concentration. That's where the spiritual path goes. So from a spiritual path, the spiritual path of the Gita and the Upanishads say, look, you have a puja room. That's where the focus is. You go, you can worship there, do that from a state of contemplation, from a meditative state. Be focused when you are worshiping. It's not about having it distributed at multiple places that makes it any stronger in that regard, as an example. And if you take this more from a practical sense of perception, you will realize when you go on a path of inquiry, which is what I would strongly encourage each one of you to do. Don't just blindly believe, but inquire. But on a path of inquiry, you will realize A paper with a picture of a god and deity becomes divine or holy if you perceive divinity in it, if you as a seeker perceive divinity in it. A stone becomes a deity when you perceive a deity or a divinity in it. Otherwise, a paper or a stone is like any other inanimate object that is found everywhere in this universe. So who gives it the holiness, or for lack of a better word, or the divine aspect of it? It is your perception. A miniature image in a car, as an example, becomes godly when the occupants perceive the divinity in it. If you have a friend who gets into the car who really doesn't believe in that miniature image, for him or her, it doesn't make any difference. It's just an image. But for you who believes and you perceive divinity in that image, there a sense of godliness kicks in. So the moment the perception ceases, only the object remains. Which is why Krishna in chapter 8, verse number 8, actually says this. Krishna says, contemplate on the divine, and through that process, you attract and connect to divinity. The contemplation of the divine is what's more important. It's not about whether you have an image or a picture or a portrait everywhere in your house, but it is the contemplation. It is how you think about the divine, how you connect to the characteristics of the divine that gets you there, which is what Krishna talks about in chapter 8. So spiritual maturity then. What is spiritual maturity? I wrote this down and I hope you really like this. Spiritual maturity is when an individual develops divinity within and leverages an external form as a training wheel and not a crutch. With that, I will let you continue on this path of inquiry. Hope these types of videos help. If you have any comments, please share that in the channel, and I look forward in speaking with you again.